of originating over central Texas, will actually be originating over southern or coastal Texas, or maybe even over the Gulf waters. At the moment, really not much rainfall there at all. We'll switch over to our satellite to maybe see any kind of blossoming thunderstorms, and really not seeing that either. And what most of our model guidance is saying, that we'll kind of continue with this southwesterly flow, and eventually we'll start to see the storms developing, but not until they're more over southeast Louisiana, which is going to make timing it out a little bit more difficult. We're not necessarily kind of tracking a complex of storms. We'll be waiting for that instability to start being triggered over southeast Louisiana. And notice the timing, not until much later in the night, kind of around the time getting started when most of our storms early this morning were wrapping up. And it does look like these will continue through the early morning hours and even past daybreak. So this may be an issue for our start to our Saturday. Models still kind of all over the place a bit in the timing and placement for some of the heavier storms. But as of right now, we are expecting a moderate risk or a low-end risk of some severe storms, a level 2 out of 5. Main threat, once again, being gusty winds, but also the potential for some flooding rain. We will kind of wrap things up there. We will have a complete look at the forecast on WWL Louisiana News at 5 and at 6. But if you'd like to join us on social media, we'll have a more in-depth outlook for our forecast for overnight tonight. All right, and good afternoon again. We'll give folks some time to start coming in on social media just to get a little bit more of an in-depth look at what we may be expecting during the late night hours. And again, a lot of it may not be until after midnight. And I'm with you. These are frustrating type of situations, and what does make it frustrating for a meteorologist is that there isn't a complex that we're watching that'll be moving our way. We can kind of get a rough idea of the timing and possibly those impacts as we're tracking something that isn't there yet. What we do know is we've got an upper disturbance that is out to our west, an upper low. That is sending more of a southwesterly flow aloft and even down a little bit lower toward the mid-levels. That is eventually what will bring in our rain chances. But as mentioned, there isn't really anything along the Texas coast right now. You've got some light, moderate showers inland and right along the coastline from down at Corpus Christi toward Houston and southwestern Louisiana. But even switching over to our visible satellite, you did have a little complex of storms earlier, but as they've been moving up towards southwest Louisiana, they're weakening. So what exactly are we tracking? It's just this area of instability that will be moving our way that the models have been depicting as bringing us some storms later on tonight. Now notice, even before midnight, may get a few little rumbles of thunder and a couple of little thunderstorms kind of following along this path from the southwest toward the northeast, but most of our guidance is indicating nothing really getting started until much later on in the night tonight. Now, I will say, with that said, the models from last night and the models going back to Friday have been off by several hours. When we expected it to be much later, it tended to be much earlier. So this is still something we'll be closely watching through the evening and into the overnight hours, and then likely will continue during the early morning hours. Now, the issue that we could see from this would be these type of situations where we get banding of rain over a long period of time. That is the training of effect, and that would lead to maybe bands of some heavier rainfall accumulation totals. Exactly where those set up, I don't know. It's going to be kind of as it is happening where those bands start to set up, and that will be the areas of greatest flooding potential. Now, if the bands move, then we're in okay shape, or at least better shape, but still it looks like the pattern will be for these storms to kind of continue moving over the same locations during the overnight, and really more so, when I say overnight, I'm kind of thinking before midnight. Really, these will be for the most part early Saturday morning and as our day is getting started. Now, this model has been a little bit more of the aggressive model and not always perfect with the timing, but it does have a lot of our storms through those after midnight hours into daybreak and then starting to wrap up maybe mid-morning and well before the lunch hour. Here's another high-resolution model, and again, kind of indicating those spotty showers along the Texas coast. May get a few little rounds of rainfall moving in, but doesn't get a bit heavier until, again, well after midnight, maybe even after 2 a.m. Now, this model doesn't really have the banding per se, although it does look like kind of in those later images, it does start to set up kind of that same situation. But again, this all does look to be more of an issue during our early morning Saturday hours, kind of continuing through the midday and then before the lunch hour coming to an end. These are very difficult forecasts because, as I've said, there isn't anything there that we are tracking. We're kind of waiting for it to form, and it may be, as you saw in the models, it may be that these don't really start to form until they are moving either just off of our coast or starting to set up over southeast Louisiana. Storm Prediction Center maintains that lower end threat, the slight risk for severe storms, although we were also under a slight risk yesterday, and that seemed to be a little bit higher just due to the fact that we had those strong winds moving through. Once again, the greatest threat will be the strong winds, but also a low end threat. Can't rule out an isolated tornado and even some hail. Although it does look like the main concern will once again be those heavy or strong winds, and then the heavy rainfall will be another threat. And in particular, notice how the flooding risk is a bit higher across the north here. This is mainly because that's where we've seen some of our highest totals from yesterday and going back into Monday. So this ground is completely saturated across the Florida parishes, North Shore. So as those storms kind of follow that trajectory, this will be the area, especially into Mississippi and Alabama, for the greater flooding threat. Still a higher threat even on the South Shore, and again, it really is going to depend on where those bands of rainfall begin to set up. This is all in association with an upper disturbance, which, as mentioned, there isn't anything there to track just yet. We'll be watching for that occurrence during the latter part of this evening and tonight. But it may be that these storms really don't start to fire off until they're either just off of our coast or already moving overhead. This is the upper low and the upper troughing I was talking about, and what we're going to be watching is this within this southwesterly pattern for a disturbance that develops either just off of the Texas coast or just inland into Texas. Then it's still very possible that these, whatever does come our way, sets up maybe a little bit more to our west, possibly even a little bit more to our east. Right now, the model consensus is calling for it to be right over southeast Louisiana, and something we'll be watching through really, I think, more after midnight and going toward daybreak on Saturday. So another situation with severe weather. Thankfully, this one will be the last one. We'll start drying out by the afternoon and evening on Saturday, and then Sunday through almost all of next week, hot and dry. Then the issue will be those heat indices, making it feel more like 100 degrees. We'll have a complete look at this forecast coming up on WWL Louisiana News at 5 and 6. More complete at 10, as maybe we'll start to see some development offshore, but we will be with you during the overnight and early Saturday morning hours as always. For now, I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin.